Hello, thank you for joining us. Good afternoon, and I hope all, and welcome Arthur Brooks.
Thank you.
That's
Great to
the
be
most
with you.
important thing to say.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
It is wonderful to have him back. Arthur was with us last year in this same approximate time period, in the same room. You imparted so much wisdom that there was a general demand that you return.
I'm delighted to be here. The Milken Conference is the premier conference of its type, as you all know, because you're here to talk about ideas. And the whole point is big ideas that you can actually use. So if we do our job right now in the next half hour, we'll talk about big happiness ideas that can make you into happiness teachers, maybe even starting with your families tonight. Can we do that?
Yeah, I think people would like to know how to be happiness teachers, but first maybe they'd like to know what are the secrets of happiness. That's not what I was going to queue up, but we can take the next 29 minutes and 4 seconds to talk about that.
Let's do.
So one of the things you mentioned to me, Arthur, before we were here on the stage is that your students come to you. You've had a lot of paths in your life, and we'll get into that. But now you're the Bloomberg Professor of Happiness Studies?
No. I'm the Bloomberg Professor at the Harvard Business School and the Harvard Kennedy School. And I'm a social scientist, so I teach behavioral issues. I teach a class at the Harvard Business School called Leadership and Happiness, which is surprising to a lot of people, you know, that when they find out you teach at a business school, they figure it must be accounting or marketing or finance or something, or supply chain management or something really practical like that. And I didn't know anything practical as a social scientist, so I say, no, I teach happiness, and they think I'm lying. But no, and the truth is, it's the most oversubscribed class in this semester that I teach it, because it's not the milkman, it's the milk. Everybody wants this happiness science. It's a pure science class. It has 180 students across 2 sections, 400 on the waiting list, and a secret illegal Zoom link they think I don't know about.
Our Zoom link is here for everyone to watch.
Completely legal. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
When students come to you, what are the questions that they typically come to you and ask in your office hours?
Yeah, well, they come into class with a fundamental misconception. So on the first day of class, I say, I mean, you gave away or you bid all of your elective points to get into this happiness class. You must know what it is. And I go around the room and I kind of cold call them, you know, what's happiness? I make them define it, which is kind of a fear-inducing, unhappy moment for them. And one by one, they talk about their feelings. Oh, it's the feeling I get when I'm with the people that I love. It's the feeling I have when I'm doing the things that I enjoy. And I say, wrong. Happiness is not a feeling. Happy feelings are evidence of happiness. Happiness is a combination of 3 things. It's a combination of enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. And if you don't have those 3 macronutrients of happiness and balance and abundance, you're going to be an unhappy person. When I'm talking to somebody who's unhappy, I can diagnostically figure out where they have a problem in their diet by looking at this macronutrient profile. Their enjoyment, either they're all pleasure, no enjoyment. Pleasure requires that you add communion with other people and consciousness to make it into enjoyment. You stop with pleasure, you become an addict, and you don't get happier. Satisfaction requires that you get joy at the end of struggle. So you have goals and purpose and a direction in your life. And meaning is all about being able to answer 2 fundamental questions. And this is a quiz I give my students to find out if they have adequate meaning in their life. This is heavy. I'm going to give it to you now. Why are you alive? And for what are you willing to die? And it turns out I'm not going to tell you what the answers of those questions are. But if you don't have answers, I'm going to find a problem in your happiness profile, as it turns out. And if you do have answers, and when you find those answers, it's a miracle. So this is a lot of what I talk about. Now, when they come in, we talk about the happiness habits. And the happiness habits are pretty straightforward. We look at, there's a million happiness habits you can find in the literature, but there's a big 4, kind of your happiness 401k portfolio of happiness, the things that you need to invest in every single day. There are only 4. Your faith or life philosophy or spiritual life or meditation or whatever it happens to be for you. Number 2 is your family life. Number 3 is your friendship. And for you fellow strivers, that's not straightforward because there's a difference between deal friends and real friends. You know the difference, deal friends. And last but not least, it's your work. And your work only has 2 characteristics that matter, which is earned success and serving others. Earned success meaning that you're being rewarded for the things that you do well, the value that you create, and serving others means people actually need you. If you have those 4 things, you're going to be happy. And all of those things come down to your love relationships, love of the divine, love of your family, your romantic love, the love of your friends, the love you express in your work every single day. And so that's what they come in and ask me about. They come into office hours every single day. They don't ask about their paper, their project, or any of that nonsense. They want to know about how they can have more love in their lives. It usually starts with romantic love because they're 28 years old on average, and that turns out to be a really super complicated, difficult problem for the life of a lot of young adults.
So one of the things, Arthur, we, again, talked about a little bit before was the fact that you mentioned the word strivers. We have a lot of strivers here, not just in this room.
The Milken Strivers Conference.
Yeah, we don't put it quite that way, but people who have, goals, achievements that they want to reach, but everybody, whether they're here or any place, doesn't always reach their goals and achievements. What advice do you give to your students or others in terms of balancing the striving after goals and having that, goal fixation versus present contentment and mindfulness?
There's a very interesting pattern, which is that our culture and our economy and Mother Nature all reinforce a message about how to be happy. Do what feels good, and you'll be happy. Do what your impulses naturally make you strive for, and you'll be happy. I mean, in the 60s, this is what the hippies used to say: if it feels good, do it, right? I remember my dad hearing that for the first time, and he said, "That's the end of America." He was kind of right. Anyway, so, but the point is that for people who are hard-charging, ambitious people, what feels good is success. Success. Money, power, admiration, followers, prestige, success. That's what feels good. And it doesn't lead to happiness. It doesn't. I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas talked about this in 1265. This is not new stuff. He was an outstanding social scientist. And he said that money, power, pleasure, and fame are the four idols. They're the things that always, always, always lead you astray. And each one of us, he said, has one of them we really love. We have a game I play with my class called What's My Idol? Right? And you start with money, power, pleasure, and fame, and you say, which one of those do you care about the least? Do you want to play, Conrad?
Sure.
All right.
Money, power, pleasure, or fame.
So, we got these four, and so he says this is an exhaustive list of the idols. And when your main idol, when you're really concentrated and focused on that, that's when you always do the things you don't admire about yourself and always wind up less happy. Okay, so the way to find out your own idol, we do this in my class, is you start with the process of elimination.
Okay.
So money, power, and pleasure, and fame. Which of those could you kick away and you're kind of proud that you're not attached to it very much?
Fame.
Fame. So you don't care if people know who Conrad Kiechel is?
No, don't be.
Conrad Kiechel, some guy, I don't know.
Yeah.
They don't recognize you in the airport, you don't care.
They don't.
Good.
Yeah, that's easy.
Okay, so that was easy. You got 3 left. Money, power, pleasure. What's next? Going to get a little
I want to say money, but probably power.
Well, I mean, you work for a nonprofit, so obviously you're not money obsessed.
Right. Money is not important to me. I wouldn't be in my job if it was.
Okay,
sorry, Mike.
So power, which is influence over other people, right?
Right.
And pleasure, feeling good. Feeling it. It's not enjoyment. Different than enjoyment, right? So it's, okay, now you got to get rid of one of those. Getting hot in here. Which one are you going to get rid of?
I can't get rid of pleasure.
I don't know, can you?
No.
So is that your idol? Did you, by process of elimination?
Can I find a 5th one out there? Is this like a shell game?
No, this is exhaustive. This is exhaustive.
Okay, I guess that's it.
Now, this is important because it means that when you do things in your life that you don't admire about yourself, you're going in the wrong direction. Almost always it's because you've been beguiled by your own particular thing. It's funny because I play this game myself a lot. I used to be the president of a think tank in Washington, D.C., a big think tank.
Yep.
And for 11 years. And I had a lot of sort of worldly influence and power. I hated it. I hated being called boss. It really bothered me. And the reason is because I hate anybody having power over me. I hate power. Hate it. So I can get rid of that. And the minute I walked away from that, I felt relief. So I can get rid of that. Okay. What about next? Money. Take it or leave it. Take it or leave it. It's kind of nice, but there's really not that much fun stuff to buy with money. Let's not kid ourselves. Like a 2nd, 3rd car, a beach house, what a pain. I don't want that. A boat, ugh. Sounds awful, right? Okay, so now pleasure and fame, or the admiration of others is really what it comes down to in my line of work and sort of the public intellectual line of work. The truth is, I can live without pleasure. I like pleasure, but I can live without it, You know what that leaves me with? I'm an egomaniac. And you know what? Every time I do things I don't like about myself, it's because I'm chasing the admiration of other people. It works for me just like it works for everybody else. And so this is the key thing to answer your question. Yeah. What's going on with the search that these strivers, because these are the quintessential strivers. When my students grow up, they want to be you. Right? They want to be successful, admired people. That's why they're at the Harvard Business School. And they're optimists. This is an optimist session. They ought to be optimists to have that much student debt. And so what does this mean? This means that they're going to be going for these worldly idols because the world tells them that that's the case, and they're not going to find the happiness that they seek. Happiness doesn't come from that worldly success. It just doesn't. Those are way stations toward getting the things that you really want to be happy, which is faith, family, friends, and work that serves other people. And so if I can torque their ambitions, if I can give them a bucket list with the right things in the bucket and a reverse bucket list of the wrong things in the bucket, they'll be plenty successful. They'll be super successful, but it won't matter in the same way. And the result is they got a shot at getting happier.
So that is great. Arthur, so that is so fantastic what you're doing at Harvard and in your writing and all the way you're communicating, but how do you really scale this? And not just scale it to, the world at large, but also to the business community, right, to bring, if I can, happiness into work life. So, especially in this post-pandemic time when we're trying to figure out how that does work.
Yeah. So I can wander around and go to fancy places like the Milken Conference and talk about these happiness ideas, and that's great. I hope that it's useful to you, and I hope that it results in an interesting dinner time conversation with you and your family, for sure. But that's not scalable. That's not taking it to scale. The way to take it to scale is to teach leaders to be happiness teachers. This is the way you do it. You create teachers. That's the reason that my class at Harvard is called Leadership and Happiness. And I write this column in The Atlantic every week that has an audience of about 500,000 people a week. But it's not a dart into the population. These are people who are highly educated. They disproportionately have influence in their place of work. And what I want them to do is to take this and teach it. So every time I do a talk, I do talks, about 160 talks outside the university a year. And when I'm talking to business groups, I'll say, I did a private equity conference last week, and there's hundreds of CEOs of these middle-sized companies. And I say, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take my PowerPoint slides. I'm going to give them to you. I'm going to send them to all of you. I want you to take my name off and put your name on and give the lecture as best you can. You see, what happens is there's a lot of learning. There's a big learning literature, and it shows that if you want to remember something and really remember something forever, you got to teach it to somebody. The best way to learn a foreign language is, even if you're incompetent in the foreign language, is to teach it to somebody else. That's called the plastic platypus method, believe it or not. These researchers had this little plastic platypus, a little toy, and they would make people who are incompetent in a particular field teach the subject to the plastic platypus, and they remembered the subject forever. Why? Because it's no longer limbic, which is a part of your brain that's quite instinctive, having to do with emotions and feelings, but you experience the information in the prefrontal cortex of your brain, where with the hippocampus, you can actually make memory. Furthermore, you can actually use the information analytically. So what you got to do if you want to remember something is you got to teach it, and that's the secret. Mm-hmm. I want everybody I touch, and I'm talking to politicians, I'm talking to faith leaders, I'm talking to business leaders, I'm going to family conferences, I'm going to every place I can, I'm saying, you need to be a happiness teacher in the course of your ordinary leadership. Number one, people are going to love you more, and I don't know about you, but I need more friends, and we all do, right? Number two, you're going to be more effective, and number three is the people that work for you are going to be a lot happier and more productive. It's a complete win-win-win if you see yourself as a happiness teacher. So that's my mission. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Literally, I retired as the CEO of this big nonprofit in DC so I could write, speak, and teach about love and happiness, the bonds that bring people together in love and happiness, using science and ideas, and make them teachers. And that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
That's great. Arthur, yes, please. And we look forward to that. I know, Arthur, we talked before about the fact that you take kind of a 10-year path. I'm not going to ask about that, but you just mentioned some of the science behind what you do.
Right.
And I think that's one of the most fascinating things to share, if there are any, because, the happiness is not just, talking about happiness is not just talking.
Right.
There's actually science and evolving science behind it that you've tapped into.
There's a huge,
any more insights from that?
There's a huge literature on the booming science of happiness. It's just an incredibly fascinating area. But it's a highly multidimensional area or highly multidisciplinary, which makes it a little hard to get your mind around. The class that I teach at Harvard is 20% philosophy, because that's where all the interesting questions come from. Social science doesn't pose interesting questions. Social scientists ask questions nobody's ever asked or cares about, but is able to answer them sort of exhaustively. I'm a social scientist, so I'm a member of the union, so I can say that. But the interesting questions come from philosophy and theology and ancient wisdom and the arts and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where that has to be 20%. So we're talking about Aristotle and the Buddha, and we're reading ancient scriptures from different traditions, and then 20% is neuroscience. And to be a good social scientist today, you have to know a lot of neuroscience. I spend all of my time studying neuroscience. All of my free time is actually studying this thing, because I came up in the 90s. I got my PhD in the 90s. Nobody was studying neuroscience in the 90s. But you can't do it any other way to get a mechanism of causation or mechanism of action in this field anymore. About 60% is social science, talking about everything from social psychology to clinical psychology to behavioral science to sociology, et cetera. And then the rest is management science. How do you apply these things to your life? Because really, what the happiness science is seeing yourself as an enterprise, you Inc., and you're managing you, and the currency of you is your happiness, is what it comes down to. So if you don't understand any management science, you can't even apply these things to your life, let alone applying these things to your company. So you have to have 4 different fields: philosophy, neuroscience, social science, management science. And that makes it tricky. I mean, I'm trying to get a stable of, studio of graduate students at Harvard. I have a lab called the Leadership and Happiness Lab at Harvard. And we're getting more and more people who want to do this, but they're not versed in all 4 of those fields. I see Richard Reeves here, who is, but he's one of the only social scientists I know who can do all those 4 things. It's not very normal. So that's a challenge that we have.
So Arthur, you're in the capital of faking it till you make it. This is LA, baby.
Yeah.
You've written about how that can actually be a good thing for people. Their enthusiasm quotient?
Yeah. There's this very interesting thing. William James, really the founder of modern psychology. He was a philosopher who founded modern psychology. He also taught at Harvard, so I call him my colleague William James. That's really pretentious. Anyway, so William James, he had this concept, he had this theory that we all want to do things and be things that we're not. And we kind of go through life wishing we were different all the time. And he said, I got a secret way to be that thing that you want to be. It doesn't require psychopharmacology, and it doesn't require 200 sessions of therapy, and it certainly doesn't require any invasive treatments. It requires a lot of faking. Now, I've been working for the last 11 years with the Dalai Lama. I've had a very close association with the Dalai Lama for the last 11 years. I was there 4 weeks ago in Dharamsala, doing a big conference, and it's a very interesting thing, because I remember the first time that I asked him this question. I asked him, Your Holiness, I said, what should I do when I feel hatred? What should I do when I feel hatred? And he said, act as if you felt love. The Dalai Lama told me to fake it. Imagine that. It's incredibly good psychology, because when you see yourself behaving in a particular way, you will run the causation in reverse. There's a wonderful body of literature that talks about, there's a French physiologist in the end of the 19th century named Duchenne. His whole thing was studying the human smile. He traveled all over the world to see if smiles are culturally based or physiologically based, and he found that there's 19, in almost every culture, 19 types of human smiles, okay? Only 1 is associated with true happiness. 18 are sort of cultural phenomena that display other kinds of information. Back in the day, you used to talk about the TWA smile, which is like, good morning, sir, here's your seat. I mean, we all kind of have to smile to go along and get along. The one smile that's authentically associated with human happiness, he named it. You know what he named it? The Duchenne smile, after himself, which is fantastic, I wish I could do that. I mean, it's the fruits of discovery. And what it has to do with is it doesn't have anything to do with the mouth. It has everything to do with 2 sets of muscles, the zygomatic major muscles in the upper part of the cheeks and the orbicularis oculi muscles in the corner of the eyes. If you're a happy person, when you're 80, you'll have very pronounced crow's feet. And people will see those crow's feet and will be enlivened and they'll feel joyful because of those crow's feet. You will run the mechanism of action. So don't get Botox. Don't do that because...
I was going to say, you've just destroyed the plastic
I know,
surgery industry in Los Angeles.
Just like I get kicked out of LA for this. Anyway, so
cut the live stream.
Yeah, I know, cut the mic. So, but the important point is that if you can simulate the Duchenne smile, scrunching up the corner of your eyes, you will run the causation in reverse and you will feel happier. There's a ton of research on this at the University of Michigan that shows this. How do you do it? The answer is you take a pencil and you put it between your molars crosswise, and you bite down hard, and then you look in the mirror while you're doing this, and this will involuntarily exercise the orbicularis oculi muscles, and you will feel happier. I make my students do this. Fake it till you make it, man. That's called the as-if principle in modern psychology, and it's a very important principle. You want to be a better person. I know you do. Me too. And what's my secret at this point? You know, I wanted to be a happier person. So you know what my secret was? I quit my CEO job and became a happiness professor. That's as if, man. That's faking it until I'm making it. And actually have measurement tools for life satisfaction that are believable. I make my students take a battery of 15 tests over the course of the semester, and I take them myself every year. My happiness, since I've been doing this, has gone up by 60%. Life is better. So if you become a happiness teacher, if you join the movement today and you become happiness teachers with me, you're the beneficiary. And I can vouch for that, and I can promise you that because it worked for me.
Arthur, we're in a room of humans, which is a wonderful experience after what we've been through in the last 3 years. But in the last 3 days, excuse me, in this conference, we've talked a lot and heard a lot about artificial intelligence, machine learning, everything that's happening. Yesterday, Eric Schmidt was on a session, was asked, you know, can we basically just calm down and not go forward, stop it?
Yeah.
And his answer was, if we stop it, others, and some could be bad actors, will get it before us, so we can't stop it.
Right.
I think everybody has, speaking for a lot of people I've talked to, a mixture of curiosity, wonder, and a lot of angst about what's coming. How do you process?
Artificial intelligence, like almost any other technology, can be used for good or ill. But it's not the way that we often talk about it. It's not like a car, which you can use for good by driving yourself to work and supporting your family, or getting drunk and crashing it, which is for ill. It's not like that exactly. The way that modern technology works for good or ill has everything to do with a difference that's, it's going to sound like splitting hairs, but it isn't, I promise. A difference between two kinds of problems in life. Complicated problems and complex problems. We use them synonymously, but they're not the same thing. And I studied applied math at I was at the Rand Corporation in Santa Monica. I was doing, applied mathematics for a living for a little while, doing that while I was working on my PhD. And we talk an awful lot about the difference between the two. Complicated problems require a ton of computational horsepower, but once you solve them, you can solve the same problem over and over and over again, like making a jet engine, for example. Complex problems are really easy to understand, but impossible to solve. That's the difference. Now, here's the thing. All of the problems that tech solves are complicated. All the problems you care about are complex. See, making a toaster is complicated. A cat is complex. Your love life is complex. Baseball is complex. Your friendships are complex. You understand it. You just don't know what's going to happen. That's part of the joy, but that's also part of the frustration, isn't it? That you can't figure it out. The problem that we have in a technological, a society where we handed the keys to technocrats 35 years ago. It was a great big societal bargain where we said that we're going to split up the economy between engineers and bureaucrats. And everybody's going to come up with a technological solution to everything, whether it's a machine-like welfare state or whether it's all of the technology and the internet that we think is going to solve all of our problems, and mysteriously doesn't. The reason that's so frustrating to us is because we keep thinking that the complicated problems that we're solving are going to give us solutions to the complex problems that bedevil our hearts. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. We honestly believed that social media was going to bring us together, and it didn't. The more you use social media, the lonelier you get. The more and again, this is a well-studied phenomenon. This is not an assertion from me. There's a ton of academic research on this at this point. Any amount of social media that substitutes for your in-person relationships will make you lonelier. Why? Because that's like saying, I want the warmth and love of a cat, and somebody keeps giving you a toaster. Well, I wanted a cat. Well, here's a toaster. Okay, that's a good toaster. I've got 15 toasters. I need a cat. This is the problem. We don't need this technology to solve our problems. We need human love and contact to solve our problems. That's what we need. Happiness is love. Happiness is never technology. Okay, so AI will hurt us if we actually think it's going to solve the problems of our happiness. It will help us if it simply gives us more time back to pursue our love. And the choice is going to be up to us.
Really quick, because we've only got a few more minutes. This has been so fantastic, but I do want you to touch on something excuse me, you just touched on, which is the technology, right? So these issues, these challenges, what do you tell people in terms of, what are practical tips in terms of mastering the, the monster of distraction and social media and electronic tyranny?
Big sweeping statements are not going to get the job done, especially when you're dealing with 28-year-olds who are really, really lonely. So we have rules that we set up. You know, they'll ask questions like, why can't I fall in love? And I say, how do you date? And they say, I use the apps. And I say, that's why you can't fall in love. What does it do? Literally, the technology interrupts the neurochemical cascade of the process of falling in love. Of first, the sex hormones of estrogen and testosterone kick in, and then dopamine and norepinephrine rise to give you a sense of anticipation and euphoria. Then your serotonin levels fall that make you infatuated, to make you iteratively thinking more and more and more about the person. And then oxytocin, which is a neuropeptide functioning as a hormone, comes in like the last wave onto the beach and connects you to that person fundamentally. None of it comes from technology. None of it comes from the apps. You're substituting this technology for this incredibly human process of linking ourselves to other people. So I say, you got to go meet people in person. They're like, I don't know how to do that. Well, let's have a little master class in how you actually talk to a person that you're going to meet for the first. That's how we met our spouses.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
in the old days.
I fell in love with a woman who literally didn't speak a word of English. I quit my job and moved to Barcelona so I could learn the language enough to propose to this woman. That's a typical story in the 1990s or the 1980s, right? And everybody under 35 is like, are you insane? Maybe. But the point is, we all were. We all were, because it was human, man. It was human. You know, here's what the apps do, basically. Here's what the technology does. It sorts you with respect to compatibility with another person. Compatibility is death to a relationship. What do you need? Complementarity. That's what you need. You don't fall in love with people who are so similar to you that they're like your sibling. As my adult kids would say, that's not hot, right? You need somebody who's different, And that's what you get when somebody sets you up on a date and you go out with that person and you learn about you get the point, the broader point that I'm trying to make. And so this is what we talk about. We talk about a diet where social media has to be limited to 30 minutes on all the apps across all of the applications per day, not more than that. And that's only enough time to complement your in-person relationships, never enough time to substitute for your relationships. We have to learn how to have actual introductory conversations with other people. We have to talk about things that you can do in person, and then, probably most importantly, I encourage all of my students to resist any job that's at a distance. Now, again, this is controversial at this point, right? I get it, you know? I get it. It's, you know, in the post-pandemic era, we found this.
Any job that's, some people have.
It's got to be in person. It's got to be in person, at least 3 days a week. I mean, this is what the research suggests, that at least 3 days a week you have to be with the humans. You got to be with other humans. Look, 20% of marriages start in the workplace. This is where you meet your friends. This is where you, especially strivers, is the way that it works out. You will actually mess up the neurochemical cascade of your human connection if you relegate your relationships to social media, dating apps, and work Zoom. This is the best possible way for you to interrupt the way your brain was wired for you to have love and happiness. That's the bottom line. And that's a lot of what we wind up talking about.
So Arthur, in closing, and thank you again for joining us. You are, I'm losing my voice after 5 days. This is the last of our sessions.
Yeah.
Perfect endpoint and note for the entire conference. The theme of our conference, as you can see from the monitor, has been advancing a thriving world.
Yeah.
I'm going to just ask you something we didn't talk about. Is there some single step or hope that you have for the thriving of our world?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because this session is called How to Be an Optimist.
Yeah, I'm not didn't really get into that.
But except that that's really what we're talking about. What is my expectation for a more thriving world? I'm not more optimistic than somebody else because, I've studied statistics enough to know that that is simply a prediction of probability. Optimism is, I think everything's going to be okay. Well, how do you know, right? I'm hopeful. Hope is active. That's a virtue. In most religions, hope is a theological virtue. In Christianity, they don't talk about faith, optimism, and love. They talk about faith, hope, and love, because hope says something can be done to make a better world, and we can do it, and it might not turn out okay, but I'm going to do it anyway. So yeah, I'm incredibly hopeful. I don't know what's going to happen, but I know something can be done, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's why I need everybody to join this happiness movement, because it's fundamentally a movement of hope. And we can absolutely touch a whole lot of people's lives. There's this, in the book of Sanhedrin in the Talmud, there's this ancient teaching that each person is the whole world. Right? Each person is the whole world, right? And think, if you can touch somebody with these particular ideas and lift them up, that's grounds for hope. What is a thriving world? It's a world in which you help another person to thrive. What does it mean for them to thrive? For this hope to become infectious, so they can actually see that this happier life can actually be theirs. You can have it, and you can share it. You can actually share that love with somebody else, and you can do it today. And that is the best news I can possibly give myself and leave with you.
That is a wonderful way to leave this conversation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Arthur Brooks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending.